Good evening. And this is my review, as you can read above me, or if you're full screen that you can read when you click out of the X screen, is Carrie 2013. Alright, the original Carrie, I did mention on my other video slash bullcrap, whatever. I know some of you are thinking, wow, that's not very nice of you. Anyways, as I mentioned there, I think this movie was, it was something I was interested in seeing, definitely, and am I glad I saw it? Yeah. Overall, I think the movie is pretty good. It's not great, but it's certainly not terrible, in my opinion, though. I kind of went on a rant in my other video when I was like, remakes, you know, when critics go in, I was kind of raging on critics, not necessarily remakes, but on critics, and I was saying, you know, how critics expect everything with remakes to be completely out of the box. A matter of fact, a lot of critics also think that some movies, when they were made directly from books, say they should follow the book completely. Some critics say that, some fans say that. I'm open to adaptation. I am. Is it kind of interesting sometimes to see what happens when you go buy the book? Well, what happens then is you get like, oh boy. Well, let's just say that no movie, I don't think, has literally ever done that. I think there's a few plays that have done that. Like some versions of Shakespeare's plays have been literally 100% as you would have seen on the first night of like Macbeth or something. I'm just naming off stuff, but anyways, stuff like that I think would be, you know, so uninteresting. So when you adapt it a little bit, that's the point. When you're making a movie, you're adapting. If you're making a movie based off something, you're adapting it onto the screen. You're not, if you completely just transcribe it literally, then you get something different. So I don't know why critics particularly wanted some movies to be completely by the book and other ones to be wildly off pace, because then it's something else entirely. So with the remake of Carrie, I think the way to do it right is not to follow the book 100%, and it's not to follow the original 100% if it's based off the book. If it's just a remake, then just go off, you obviously have to just go off the original when there is no book. So in this case, I think what Carrie did, 2013 Carrie, it did it pretty well. I have to say I'm pleased with how it turned out. I'm not, I'm certainly not going to jump up and down about it, but I wasn't really expecting it to be a 10 out of 10, and it wasn't. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't. But otherwise, this is actually pretty good popcorn entertainment for a Halloween movie. Because those Paranormal Activities, I don't know how they keep. Tonight they have a new one coming out, called like the Marked Ones, or whatever. And I thought, well, it's not. No, I've been in theaters where they show a preview of an upcoming Paranormal Activity movie, and yeah, people get pretty freaked out. In this one, not really. There weren't a whole lot of people getting freaked out when they were showing the trailer here. I don't know. So that means I think the effect of paranormal is wearing off. And so this Halloween, when we don't have Paranormal Activity, for the first time in like 5 flippin' years, they have Carrie, something that's more, actual Halloween, Paranormal Activity. You could release it in the summer, and it would make as much, if not more, than it does. You could release it in like early spring, like March or late February. It would make very close to the same amount. So yeah, I think that's just the way that goes. Now, do I think the movie was a good way to, did it have a proper reason for being remade? No. And sometimes when you remake a movie, it's not to do that, and sometimes it's just to cash on a name. Here, though, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's a good way to bring back the source material, to bring back Stephen King's book, which is great. And I didn't just read Carrie. The first time I read Carrie was actually about 4 or 5 years ago. 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. I lose track of time more than I lose track of anything else. But you know, I do think that I read the book just because I wanted to get into Stephen King. So it's a nice way to bring back to more of a in-hands way the original Stephen King novel, which is, it's a good book, it's a good story, and this movie adapts the story actually pretty well. Let's start off with some good things. I like to do this. Sometimes I just go through the whole movie, but recently I've been going more toward what's good, what's not so good, and what's just general, the overall feel. So what's good, I think the cast actually was surprisingly good, especially the lead two, which are, of course, Chloe Moretz and Julianne Moore. Now, do either of them outmatch the original De Palma's cast? You know, Sissy Spacek and Piper Laurie. I'm going to say, who is it? But no. And should we really be comparing them? Maybe not. You know, there are certain cases where it's appropriate for a remake when you look back to the original and you criticize it. In this case, maybe, but at the same time, not really. You know, you could compare John Wayne's performance to Jeff Bridges' performance, and it's they're two kind of different performances, even though they're the same character, based on the same thing in a movie by the same name. It doesn't, you know, there's sometimes where it doesn't compute. You know, if you compare, let's say, Die Hard to, what was that new one? Olympus Has Fallen, that's appropriate. That's very, very appropriate. And at the same time, if you compare, let's say, I don't know, let me just pull something out of a hat. The Blue Lagoon from 1980 to Paranormal Activity, or something that's completely off balance. Double Indemnity from the 40s to, I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that's off. Stuart Little. You know, there are some times when people say, oh, you know, point by point, what they, you know, how they compare. Sometimes it's just not appropriate. In this case, it's kind of appropriate, but not really. So anyways, do they hold a candle up to the originals? They hold a little candle. Let's say they hold at the very least, a birthday candle up to the original cast. They don't overshadow the original movie and their performances at all, but I think that they went with a really, really great cast here. What really surprised me, though, was Moretz. Kind of the same deal with Spectacular Now. You have a girl who's obviously from the outwards very, very appealing to an audience, and to, you know, of course, to a general people would say, oh, look how beautiful, look how pretty they are, yeah. And yet they're able to turn them into a social outcast. Maybe a little bit more to a finite point in this film than Spectacular Now, but it's kind of viable in this one because Moretz, you know, gives a performance that's good. It's not necessarily Oscar worthy, and it's not necessarily one of the best of the year. And it's I would say of like the leading horror heroine heroes kind of / villains that we've gotten in the past few years. She's definitely given one of the better performances, I think, in that regard. Spacek, I think, also did a great job back in the day. But one thing I totally noticed, and it kept kind of taking me out of the picture for a second, was Moretz is, I think is she 16 or is she 17? She's in her teens. And then the rest of the cast, the rest of the teens are in their 20s. I don't know what's up with that, because that it's kind of nice to get that, actually, though. You know, most of the time, like Spacek was in her 20s when she did Carrie. I would still kind of pass her off as a high schooler, though. In this case, Moretz kind of looks like an 8th grader, a 9th grader versus a senior. It's kind of weird. They can't exactly find what it should be and what it's designed to be, but they go for something that's in the same time frame, though. It's weird. It's weird. So when the character of Tommy Ross is asking her out to prom, you're like, wow, it's almost like a teen prostitute is being picked up by a guy who just got out of the army. It's kind of like that. It's kind of weird. It's kind of weird. It kind of made me uncomfortable for a second. But anyways, then we move to Julianne Moore, who I think does fantastic, just fantastic as Margaret White. I think Moore gives a performance that's different from Piper Laurie's performance, and that's really refreshing. But then again, so did Moretz, and a lot of the cast actually gave different performances from the original, which helps, really helps, help this film overall not be a direct clone of the De Palma 76 film. But I'll say more about that later. Moore gives the character a little bit of life. It's certainly a memorable character, so to speak. Margaret White is just overall, I think, in film and in literature, a name that sometimes, in certain situations, will stand out to you. Because it's a character that stands out. It's not your normal, average, run-of-the-mill mother character. Not at all. More along the lines of Psycho, the mother from Psycho. You know, obviously something like that. But yeah, I do think that more between the two, Moretz and Julianne, yeah, I'll give the better performance to Julianne Moore, but obviously she's gotten way more, she's got better acting chops, she's been in the business way longer, obviously. So she did a really, really fine job, and helped, I think, lift the overall quality of the film in her acting. Now, I did hear that Jodie Foster was originally cast. That would have been something. I'm definitely, Julianne Moore is a great choice for the role, and I believed her every second. Every second. When she became Margaret White down to her core, when she is hitting Carrie, when she is forcing the Bible onto her, and forcing scripture, and forcing her to pray, yeah, Moore had it. Piper Laurie, yeah, it was the same deal. However, with Jodie Foster, I think it would have been, with Moore, it was, there were a couple moments where you're like, ooh, I don't really want to meet her in person if she's like that. With Foster, I think it would have been, just because Foster has been, from the films I've seen her in, I've never really seen her tackle a big kind of villainous role. Of course, her most famous films like The Accused, Silence of the Lambs, she's kind of the hero of the story, the main center point of the story. She's kind of, she is kind of a villain in, I guess, in Elysium, which I haven't seen, but from the commercials, yeah, she looks like she's kind of a more villainous role. I think she would have been just outright fantastic and terrifying in this role. I think she would have, I don't know, just between the two, if I were to say, okay, put them side by side, if they were both in contention for the role, let's say Julianne Moore and Jodie Foster were there, oh boy, I would have to literally visualize it, and have to visualize it for a while before I made a decision between the two. I mean, it's not like apples and oranges in any way, but it's, I'd say more along the lines of, what's a good comparison here? It's more along the lines of steak and pork. They're both great, but, depending on what day it is, how you're feeling, you might gravitate more toward one or the other. So I think Moore, gives a really, really great performance, and is pretty standout, actually, for the film, and one of the best parts. The supporting cast, all the teens, are very hit and miss. Tommy Ross's character was a complete dweeb, and I didn't really believe him all that much in the role. I don't know the young actor's name, but I don't know. Just didn't hit it for me at all. He didn't really have a whole lot of charisma. That's the problem, because back in the original, not to compare the two, but the way that Tommy Ross in the book, comes off as kind of a more stiff character. I think William Catt breathed some life into the role back in the 70s. And part of that, of course, might have been the script they were working off of, and De Palma's direction. But and this one, he just came off as a stiff, and I don't know. I just think that's, I didn't really care for that too much. Chris Hargensen, that character was kind of decent. I mean, had her moments. The actress did a pretty good job. She had her moments. But overall, she just doesn't, the way Nancy Allen, I swear, I'm not intentionally saying let's compare the two, but because in actuality, they are completely different characterizations of the same role. But in this one, it comes off as kind of more average teen. I would not say that Nancy Allison's character of Chris Hargensen in the original was an average teen. I would say she was a more demented and controlling teen. In this one, she was kind of more average, a little bit whiny, more like in the book. Whereas the original Carrie film kind of took a different approach on it. So yeah, not to compare the two, but anyways. Sue Snell, I think, in the film, this new one, was actually more of a hit in this case. I don't know, outside of the two main stars, I don't know anybody in this cast. Anyway, she did a pretty good job. It's a different role. It is a different characterization of this particular role in the film. So I kind of liked the way they portrayed it this time. There were some things they did a little different. They included one subplot in the film, which if you haven't seen the original film or this film or have read the novel, I won't spoil way too much for you. If anything, I'll just I'll overall say, hey, I liked this scene better, and I won't name off like a specific aspect maybe that would spoil part of the story, and just tell it to you. So I'll say that the subplot they included from the book was a welcome addition, and it helped kind of added to the character actually. Like it did in the book, it did a really nice job. I wouldn't say overall it's better than the original because, what's her name? Amy Irving did a good job in that one, and so did this girl. I swear, I have to go IMDb this for a while and figure out who all these people are. But anyways, I'd say these two are actually pretty balanced. I wouldn't say one is particularly way better or way worse than the other. I still can't remember the name of the gym teacher. The gym teacher, let's say. Probably prefer the original in this case. Not to really compare them, point by point, but this new one kind of had a more teacherly quality about her. When she was like helping Carrie, after Carrie gets asked to prom, in the story, then Mrs. Dujarn or something, whatever. The gym teacher kind of points out some things and like, hey, you can do this and you can look prettier, And this one she kind of came off as more of a little bit of a, I'm a teacher, I'm a teacher, I'm not really your friend. And the original was more like Carrie has a real friend. And I like that aspect a little bit. And then, I think, let's see, I was going to say, in this new one, though, there was one scene that kind of bothered me a little bit. No, more than a little bit. There's a scene where her character, I don't think this spoils much. It's not a huge plot point by any means. She's like seen dancing, and I think it couldn't have been with another teacher. It had to have been a kid that was in school. And she's dancing with him at the prom. I thought, oh my God, are you serious? Are you dead serious? Because that does not bode well with me at all. I thought that's a weird turn we didn't need to take. Yeah. Anyways, otherwise there's one other main character that I'd like to mention. The character Billy Nolan. This new guy was almost 120% different from John Travolta. Travolta was the bad guy and he relished it. This guy's the bad guy and he takes it pretty seriously. And Travolta kind of filled his role with piss and vinegar. He was able to, make him look more heroic in the way of, I'm doing this for society because society needs to move on kind of deal. And that was the thing for the 70s. So to update it this way, I think was appropriate. And it was a nice way to change it up. But I didn't think really that it came off as more memorable. this guy, this new Billy Nolan is okay. I wouldn't say he was a particularly strong character. He is definitely a more supporting character. Travolta, it felt to me, got more screen time because he was actually kind of a little bit known back then. And and his being in the movie was actually, there were some people that said, I know who that guy is. Or versus a few other members of the cast, certainly in the original film. This one, yeah, this guy, he's completely I don't think I've seen him in anything before. If not, then he's been in something he's been a really, really small role in something I have seen, and I just can't connect the dots. But either way, this new Billy Nolan was kind of more stiff and wooden like Ross. But anyways, what else was good? The direction was actually really good. Kimberly Pierce directed the movie, of course, famous for Boys Don't Cry. Was this as good? No, they're two completely different things again. But I do think that the way that she directed certain scenes and where they placed the camera was really, really well done. And it's certain particularly today, horror movies really go for, in general, not all, but they go for the shaky cam. Let's make it realistic. Literally, there are the two horror movies they showed tonight for previews for coming out. I think they were both in January. There's one called Devil's Due, which I've never heard of before, and I haven't really done my research on. And then there's this Paranormal Activity Marked Ones thing, which I knew was coming, but I didn't really look into it too much. They're both the held not mockumentary. There's a word for it. I can't really think of it. Like Chronicle. It was supposed to be a. Oh my gosh! Why am I blanking on this? This is a whole subgenre that's exploding right now, and I can't think of what every liberal out there calls it. But anyways, they try to make it real. Say this really happened. Of course, which was almost started intentionally by Cloverfield, which is a certain movie that did it almost to the far extreme. But in this case, I think that's almost how horror movies are made today, and I don't like that. I like my horror movies to be, if anything, you move the camera a little bit to add maybe a tiny bit of realism now and again, like they do in dramas. Yeah, that makes it overall a much scarier feel. Whereas this, sometimes when when you're moving the camera and when your perspective is somebody running and they're holding the camera and they're running, all you can see is like the ground, and sometimes they'll put the camera back here, as they're running, they'll look forward, but the camera's back here so they can show the audience that's going to see this one day, of course, how it all happened and what happened. And yeah, I absolutely think that is BS, because a lot of these movies, of course, they don't start recording when abnormal things happen. They start recording when everyday events are happening, just so they can set themselves up so that we know exactly who they are. Yeah, that's the way life works, right? Right. Absolutely 100% right. Anyways, so that found footage, that's the word I was looking for. Found footage films are complete BS. Paranormal Activity series, complete BS. The first one had an idea with it, though, and it kind of overstayed its welcome even in its short running time. The sequels I have not liked. I've not even seen which was the last. I think I saw parts. I saw the second one all the way through and said, "Why am I watching this?" I think I saw parts of the third one and didn't finish it. Fourth one I haven't touched yet. So and this fifth one, Marked Ones, not for me. No, I'm not gonna jump on this bandwagon and go take off. And yeah, found footage films are not for me at all. Like Cloverfield, not a particular favorite of mine. Even back to like Blair Witch Project which is a little bit of a different case. That's done with a little bit more pristine, quality, and it's a little bit more, it's a little bit better quality. But that was then. This is now. Now they're doing it very, very schlock, very, very schlock, In the case of like Blair Witch, you know, they're like, hey, you know, we're gonna document this because this could be important. Whereas in like these paranormal activity movies, they're just filming to film. You know, it's a little bit different and totally less viable. So for Pierce to take this approach and say, hey, let's hold the camera straight the whole time. Maybe there were a couple of times when it was handheld camera, a little bit moving, you know, stuff, but it wasn't horrible. You know, and that's very, very refreshing, especially nowadays. But overall, I think that horror movies should be more like this. Like The Conjuring and, you know, the guy who makes those movies, James Wan, is the director. He's moving on to Fast and Furious 7. You know, the way he's directed his movies don't use that either. And I really, really respect that. He doesn't really do that a whole lot. Sometimes he'll do it. Sometimes, but it's certainly not as bad as the paranormal stuff. Not at all. Okay. I feel like I'm kind of going on a little bit longer than I should here. So I'll quickly recap what I didn't like about it. You know, just because I say that's what I liked doesn't mean that's not all I liked. It covers a lot of ground, actually. The biggest problem I found with the film overall was the way it just played it too safe. Way too safe with the cliches. Or not the cliches, rather. The way it played too close to the De Palma version, which is now cliche. For completely, totally following it like that. It was nice to kind of pay a couple of homages to it, like the shower scene when they're showing, you know, some same camera angles. That's a nice way to show respect to De Palma and say, hey, I'm not out here to top you. I'm here to make my own movie, not specifically follow yours. So I did like, overall I think the movies are pretty similar, but they're not a clone. It's not Psycho from Gus Van Sant. That is a clone carbon copy. That does not count as a movie. That counts as rewinding the movie and playing it again. Except this time it's in color, this time there's different actors, and this time every once in a while we'll spice in little bits of, you know, half-a-second shots that don't matter. And that's the only thing we'll change. Otherwise, you're back to square one. You are 100% back to square one. Go do it again. That's literally, yeah, not the case here. Not the case. And I do think it's more along the lines of the True Grit remake. Yeah, there's certain sequences where the dialogue is 100% identical. And there are certain sequences where just the imagery and stuff is 100% different from the original. So that's the way to go. That's the way to go, I think, with these remakes is don't have it be 100% carbon copy, but don't totally, and on the other end of the spectrum, don't just put the title in there to get marquee value and to bump up the market price on it. No. Don't, you know, like, oh boy, let me think up an example here. Let's say they remake Friday the 13th again, because the last remake evidently was so bad they have to start over again, which it probably wasn't. In retrospect, I don't think it was, but let's say they make it it's another Woods movie, but this time it's not Jason doing it, it's somebody else. But they put on a hockey mask, and we see it is not Jason. Let's say Jason is mentioned like twice in the movie, and they call it Friday the 13th. That is a total ripoff of just the name. Don't do that. And at the same time, don't clone it. Don't clone it. So Pierce, I think I have to give credit to, and the Coen brothers, I give them credit too for making True Grit the same way. Even though overall I probably appreciate the originals more for adapting it the way they did in the first place, you still have to say they tell the story, and they get the story out just fine. So yeah, I like that. But anyways, I digress a little bit there. What else I didn't like? I didn't really like the ending of the original movie, of course, is a great ending. The way they have it, it's a dream sequence where Carrie's hand comes out of the rubble to grab Sue. Great ending. This ending, when they started, it looked like they were gonna. I'm not gonna spoil if they did it or not, but what happened, I was not really happy with. I was not happy with it. Not to say they completely did it, but not to say they didn't. So I'll leave you to, unless you've seen the movie and you're just watching this because you're watching it. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll say I'm not going to tell you. So if you're dying to hear the answer, just go see the movie. You can't get it out of me even with cyanide. Okay, maybe. Don't test that. Okay. Moving on. I didn't really like. There were a couple of things. The amount of gore on screen, I think, after all, got maybe a little distracting. Not to say that it's not unrealistic. If there's one point where, like, of course, in the prom scene where everybody's, they're getting stuff thrown at them and they're bleeding to death, and whatever. Yeah, there are times, of course, where you're gonna get blood, but the way it's not pumping out the gore necessarily, but it becomes just it takes you out just a tiny bit. You're just like, ooh, it's kind of gruesome. But then again, the whole story of Carrie is pretty gruesome. I think, that's just my biggest problem with this one, is it kind of almost follows the original too much in the way that True Grit did. Then again, if you model something off True Grit, which received how many, 9 or 10 Academy Award nominations, you're probably not doing that bad. Anyways, but I'll mention a couple other additions here that I did like. In this one, when they do the prom scene and the way that Carrie gets her revenge on everyone, I liked the way they didn't 100% do it the way they did in the original. How she starts off the destruction it completely took me by surprise. I did not know that was going to happen, but when it happened, I was like, whoa, nice job. And I have to add, though, there's one part, though, when they're, which is a nice modern addition, when they YouTube Carrie White, and they put her on YouTube when she's, of course, in the beginning of the film, getting her first period, which, I have to say, when I read the book, if I'll just take you away for a second, when I read the book for the first time that happened, my stomach was in knots for 2 reasons. Number one, just that idea, just the way that King makes you visualize it complete. I just thought, that is not the number one thing on my watch list today. And number two, the way that the kids react to it, I thought, oh God, how could anybody be that cruel? And yeah, De Palma did a great job of that in the original. In this one, it was pretty good, but you feel a little. There's a little less cruelty in this one. But the way they added in that video, though, that was a nice way to step it up and make it more modern. And not totally, visualize this in the 70s. But I will say, though, that when they later on, that becomes a little bit more important. It's not just something, it's just on the internet. There is a certain thing that happens with that video that happens later, and when they did it, I was like, oh, those bastards and bitches. Oh, I got so hangry, because it reminds you, that teens are absolutely, to their core, usually good people, but when they do something bad, they shouldn't be doing it, and they should get punished. Maybe not in the way that Carrie does, but yeah, I was just internally thinking that whole time. I was like, ooh, I am so glad I know what's coming next, so I can be so satisfied by it, But anyways, I think I'll wrap it up here. I'll be kind of quick. There was one thing. There's one thing I didn't mention yet, but Carrie, the original '76, is so 70s. It's so 70s. That's one thing, though, that you can't really come off and say about the original Carrie, is it's not timeless. It's not timeless. There's not a certain, there's not a certain thing that makes it, this could happen anywhere at any time. No. It's 70s. I mean, the way the music sounds, and the way the camera is, and the way the lighting is, and the way, there's one part where they, speed up the boys when they're talking, so I was like, it sounds like that. I thought, oh, that's really 70s, yeah. And the way the cars look and everything, yeah, it's totally untimeless. This remake follows kind of similar mistakes, but this one has a little bit more of a wider range. You literally couldn't say with a straight face and be completely honest when you say that the original Carrie could have happened in the year like 1962 or 64. You couldn't say it happened in 1987, 88. You couldn't say that. This new Carrie, I would say this would work in 2005. This would work, this could be true in 2007. This could be true potentially in like 2016, 2017. It has a little bit more of a accepting range to it, which is a nice way to make it. But overall, the film does get some points subtracted from it for the way it follows the original, maybe a little bit too closely. But then again, a couple of new additions is never necessarily a bad thing. It's not just automatically wrong to put in a subplot from the book that the original film didn't follow, so keep on trucking that way, remakes, especially if you're coming off of a book. If the original didn't do something in the book, and it's something that, could really add something, put it in. Put it in. That's about all I'm going to say. Overall, Carrie is a 7 out of 10. It's not a great Hollywood, make 100,000 more of these movies like, The Dark Knight or Spectacular Now, or even like Argo, and even something like Django Unchained, something like that. I'm just naming off some movies that I've liked, some more recent than others. I am saying, though, that remakes should kind of follow this tag a little bit, though. They should kind of examine these footprints that this film and that Pierce has left behind and say, okay, this is how it worked, this is how it didn't work. Let's go by how it worked and make it better. And that's all I'm going to say. Keep watching, people. I'm going to put up pretty soon here a review of Rush, which I saw a week ago now, but I've been, I was so tired after I saw it, though, that I was exhausted. So, in that respect, I'm going to say Rush coming up next. Make sure you check out any other videos that could be related to this video, like the slashing up the charts stuff, which you people are watching. I'm really glad you're watching that. My review of Gravity got some hits, so thanks for that. And again, just beware of Carrie. You will know her name, as the tagline says.